It is Saturday morning here at St. Peter's Square behind me. The funeral of Pope Francis now just 8 hours away. The square is closed at the moment. It will reopen at 7 a.m. local time, just 3 hours ahead of what is expected to be the largest single event here since the funeral of Pope John Paul II 20 years ago this month. Italy's Interior Ministry expects more than 200,000 people to attend, and about 250,000 people from every corner of the world have already paid their final respects, filing past the simple coffin and Spartan platform to say a prayer, to reflect and say goodbye. Then, in a private ceremony led by a cardinal, Carmelengo Kevin Farrell, the church's acting head, a white silk veil was spread over the late Pope's face, his body sprinkled with holy water. Let's pause and listen for a moment. Finally, in a gesture officially ending this 3-day lying in state period, the coffin was closed and sealed, and then the basilica was filled with the sound of a hymn to Mary, the Mother of Christ. Outside all day today, and in fact ever since Pope Francis died. Security, of course, has been ramping up, the effort complicated by his desire to be buried outside the walls of the Vatican, several miles away from us, meaning a funeral procession through the streets of Rome and many points along the way to Safeguard. There are thousands of people who are still waiting to get in to see Pope Francis. This is the last day they'll have that opportunity. They've already started to set up for the funeral, which is to take place here in St. Peter's Square. It's going to be outdoors. As you can see, they've set up platforms for journalists to broadcast from. There are a number of media organizations as well have rented spaces on rooftops around here to get a vantage point. This service is going to take place outdoors in St. Peter's Square, but the Pope is not going to be buried here in Vatican City. He's going to be buried in Rome. We want to show you the route his procession is likely to take. This is the Porta del Perugina. It is the exit through which the Pope's casket will come as it leaves St. Peter's Basilica. It goes by Casa Santa Marta, where the Pope lived all these years. The casket will then come down this road in this direction, actually leaving Vatican City now and entering the city of Rome.
The route is filled with traffic now, but it'll be closed off on Saturday, and it's likely many thousands of people will line the sidewalks trying to catch a final glimpse of the Pope's coffin. His casket will pass this Baroque church. Francis was the first Jesuit to become Pope, and this is the first Jesuit church in Rome, Chiesa del Gesù. The motorcade will also pass the Piazza Venezia and another site familiar to many tourists, the Colosseum, before finally arriving at its destination.
And this is where Pope Francis will finally be laid to rest, where he'll be entombed. It's the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore. It's a basilica Pope Francis often visited, that he loved and that he requested he be buried here. The Vatican has already released an image of his tomb. It is, as the Pope requested, very simple, just an inscription of his name, Franciscus, and a depiction of his pectoral cross. He will be the first Pope to be buried outside Vatican City in more than 100 years. Joining me now are two people who've been providing perspective for us all this week. Colin Flynn, Vatican correspondent for EWTN News, and Father Patrick Mary Briscoe, editor of our Sunday Visitor, the National Catholic newspaper. Father Briscoe, you spent the day here, much of it in the square. What was it like?
Anderson, I was so struck by the joy that people were expressing today, because unlike the previous days, which had to me felt more solemn, today we had all the young pilgrims beginning to arrive. Many of these young people, of course, had been anticipating attending all the Jubilee events for young people and the canonization event of another great young blessed, and now they're faced with attending the funeral mass for the Pope. So it's really quite a transition.
And Colin, a lot has been made about how Pope Francis sort of tried to simplify some, not only of the funeral what the funeral would be like, but other aspects of the papacy. What do you expect for tomorrow? There's still obviously
Anderson,
rites.
I don't think there's any such thing as a simple papal funeral. You will still have that rich tradition and the liturgy. It will be steeped in beauty and the culture of the church. But ever since the beginning, 2013, that was Francis's ethos. The papal palace just behind us, he said, I'm not staying there. I'm staying in the guest house. An hour outside of Rome, you have Castel Gandolfo with the summer palace, where popes would stay for the entire summer. Francis's message was, well, the poor would never go to a summer palace, so I'm going to leave that as well. So now that we have the funeral, I think will be much the same as past funerals for popes, but it will be the burial. As you see that tombstone with just his name in it in Latin, Francis. The funeral's been covered, the cost of it. That was another incredible thing that we learned when they released his testimony.
He got somebody to donate money to...
He arranged for it all to be paid for, so it wouldn't come from the faithful, money from the church, but that money could still be used for the poor. And, you know, we met the other day inside the Basilica as people were going in to pay their last respect. I found it actually more emotional than I thought I would. And we got to go right up beside the coffin. Now, we know that there had been a problem at the start of this with people taking selfies and maybe being a bit irreverent. But, you know, the Vatican officials were trying to keep it graceful and peaceful. And when my wife and I, who we met covering Pope Francis, so that's how special it is, I saw the tears in her eyes. And actually, when I saw Pope Francis looking much different, lying in that coffin, it was an incredible moment. You could see this is the end of a papacy, and this is ushering in a new one, and you know, heading into the future for the Catholic Church.
It's also, I mean, Father, what we're going to see tomorrow is something we have not seen in modern times, certainly not televised like this, of a Pope being moved through the streets of Rome in a procession to go to this basilica.
I think the procession is so important, Anderson, because the procession is something that most Catholics will experience as part of a funeral mass. And so will feel in a certain way familiar, taking your grandfather, you know, to say your last goodbye to him. And the procession symbolizes what Catholics believe, that we're all journeying towards something, journeying towards our end, our final destination, the ultimate point of it all. And I think that it will give people all the opportunity for one last farewell, which is so beautiful. But also it will symbolize what Pope Francis called for at the very beginning of his papacy, in his first words after he was elected, calling for all of us to be journeying together.
It is a chance, Colm, for many people, maybe who didn't get a chance to come here, or even if they did, to line the streets to see him, to look outside their windows and see him.
Yeah, it's another opportunity to say goodbye. And we were told yesterday by Sant'Egidio, which is a community here who look after refugees and the migrants. They're not part of the Vatican, but they're right next to the Vatican. And Pope Francis gave them huge support throughout his papacy. They told us that lining the steps of the Basilica of Mary Major will be the poor and the needy of Rome. They will be the last to say goodbye to Pope Francis.
I drove that route today, and there's a number of sort of landmarks that have personal significance. I mean, there's the first church of the Jesuits.
The Jesu, yes.
Right. There's a Piazza of Argentina that you pass by as well.
It's like landmarks, all these great memories that come out. That's part of the difficulty of going to a funeral mass, is that you have all of these wonderful memories. That's the cause of joy, the sorrow with saying goodbye, but then the sense that you have something to carry forward.
Yeah.
You know, it was a beautiful image today. It really struck me when they were sealing his coffin. Before they did that, you know, they had the 2 pages. That struck me. You know, we all get caught up in our lives and what we've done. 2 simple pages summarizing his entire life and everything he achieved, put into the coffin. But when they put the white silk in his face, representing that, okay, you are going to experience the darkness of this world. When they put the lid on the coffin, you're in darkness forevermore. But the light of God will always be in your face.
I also think there's such power in in seeing all this and showing it, because this is something we often sort of hide away and dress up as pretty and, you know, put makeup on people who are dead and you know, talk in hushed whispers. You're seeing everything, and I think there's such strength and power and meaning in that.
One of the very solemn moments that will happen at the end of the Mass is the casket will be blessed with holy water and incensed. Two symbols, 2 ritual acts that Catholics will be familiar with, and others who have seen a Catholic funeral. And eventually a great hymn will be sung called the In Paradisum. And that hymn begins with the words, "May the angels lead you into paradise." And so these familiar rituals give us a sense of comfort and great consolation as we enter into those prayers.
Not even 2 minutes into our conversation, and Father Lorenzo de Bedia, known here as Padre Toto, needs the mic off him. He's got to go. As a Catholic priest working in one of Argentina's villas, or simple, humble neighborhoods, Padre Toto's work does not stop. As he pedals away,
All right, so he said he's going 25 blocks on his bike.
we try to keep up.
Is that him? No, that's not him.
He's heading here,
But you can see a lot of these people are now just getting off the bus as they've come in from places outside of Buenos Aires.
a gathering of the working class.
Entonces no puede trabajar.
She's explaining to me what the cartoneros are, and she said it's individuals who on their own will basically collect things that are to be recycled, and then they'll sell them to make a living.
They're here combining a planned protest for higher pay and better benefits with a warm tribute to Pope Francis.
La gente muy humilde.
And she said Pope Francis would look around as she believes and would see this crowd and see it as his people, the humble.
Which explains why Padre Toto's here.
He's clearly well known here.
And too busy still for a chat, suggesting we try tomorrow. So we do.
How many years have you been here?
Yo hace 25 años llegué al barrio.
25 years.
La prevención para los chicos, adolescentes y jóvenes.
There's a lot of prevention work they do too. He points out as a priest of the Villa, he says you're not just in charge of a parish, which is his back there, but you're part of the community and you minister to the people here actively.
Which we witness ourselves.
Quiero dar mi abrazo por Paraguay.
Recién le voy a ir a buscar, padre.
Contá conmigo.
Bueno, padre, chao.
Her son passed away.
Loss is shared here.
Y él le lavó los pies.
A tu hijo.
Sí,
She says her son had his feet washed by cuando era cardenal,
sí,
by then Cardinal Bergoglio.
sí, sí.
A few years later, steps from where we sit, Luisa Rodriguez says her son was gunned down and killed. She says Cardinal Bergoglio was always here for them. And now, with his passing,
Parece que quedamos sin nadie en el mundo. Muy, muy valioso fue para nosotros.
it's like we're left with no one in the world. He was so valuable to us, she says. It's in part why Padre Toto feels this is no time for him to sit still, even if he too is hurting.
Tener la responsabilidad de seguir su legado, ¿no?
He says you have to continue on with the Pope's legacy. He said in this moment you feel a lot of sadness for the loss, but at the same time, peace.
Yo tenía que decir.
Okay, he's got to go. Okay. Muchísimas gracias, Padre. Padre Toto, Aaron needing that mic to come off again because just in a few hours from now, he's going to be coming here to the Plaza de Mayo, and they're preparing. You can see they've got security behind me. Several large screens are up. They're testing the music. They're going to hopefully try to live stream the funeral mass, and then they're going to have another mass at the funeral, followed by a pilgrimage to the sites that Pope Francis visited when he was cardinal here, and then his beloved San Lorenzo soccer team will be playing an entire day to celebrate one of their own who became the world's.
As we hear those bells tolling, of course, at 9 o'clock where you are in Buenos Aires.
You're looking at live pictures from St. Peter's Square, where tomorrow world leaders and royalty will gather to pay their final respects to a pope, for a man who wishes to be remembered for leading the church with humility and acts of service. CNN's Clarissa Ward brings us now the story of female prisoners in Rome who had their feet washed by the Pope last year, to talk to them about how they're going to remember Pope Francis.
Behind the high walls and barbed wire in Rebibbia Women's Prison, it's easy to feel forgotten. But that changed one day in late March of last year with a visit from Pope Francis. Sitting in his wheelchair, the Pope engaged in a centuries-old pre-Easter ritual, washing the feet of 12 inmates. Dorota, who has spent a decade behind bars, was first in line.
When I got on the stage and the Pope got close to me, I felt a very strong emotion. I was shaking. And the thing that really struck me the most was that I felt a true warm kiss on my feet, something that can't be described. It will never happen again in my life.
Did you feel that you were in the presence of someone who's close to God?
Io sì, sentito molta umiltà.
Yes, I could feel a lot of humility in him. I saw that he is good, a man with a big heart that is close to us, a very religious person, an extraordinary person.
The foot washing ritual seeks to imitate Jesus Christ, washing his disciples' feet the night before his death. This was the first time a pope washed the feet of all women, a striking departure from his predecessor Benedict, who only washed the feet of men and later only the feet of priests.
And what do you think made this pope special or different? Why do you think it is that he had the ability to touch so many hearts?
Perché era un papà di popolo, un papà semplice, un papà.
Because he was truly a good pope, the pope of the people, of all the poor,
di tutti i poveri.
of everyone in need, prisoners, the homeless. He was there with his heart.
Di quelli che stanno in mezza strada. Lui stava lì con il suo cuore.
E per le altre donne?
I ask if the other women felt the same way.
Sì, infatti qui mi hanno scritto ragazze.
Veramente?
Yes, in fact, here I have a paper with some thoughts from the other inmates.
Sì. Allora, quello delle ragazze. Per noi detenute, la
For us
visita
inmates,
del
the
Papa
Pope's
è
visit
stata
was very emotional.
un'emozione grande. Tramite Papa Francesco, nel nostro
Through
cuore,
Pope Francis, we felt as though our hearts had received true forgiveness. We felt seen and understood. He never abandoned
ci siamo
us,
sentite viste e comprese. Non ci ha
not
mai
even in his final
abbandonate.
days.
Returning to her cell, Dorota said she won't be watching the funeral on TV. It would be too painful. Instead, she'll carry the memory of that meeting when Pope Francis brought warmth to the hardest of places.
And Jake, you can probably see behind me now in St. Peter's Square, this is pretty much the emptiest we have seen it all week. They have completely shut down this area. Workers here will be going through the night now, trying to prepare everything to make sure that nothing goes wrong, that everything goes off without a hitch tomorrow as we prepare for this historic event, Jake.